critics of an existing paradigm. So I don't know where this came from, but I kind of woke up in the middle of the night last night thinking about this. So, like, what is a paradigm? I'd say it's a collection of ideas or interlocking theories. And paradigms act like a lens that you look through. And that's your perception of the world, what you see through that lens, through that paradigm. So for me, I used to teach economics. So an example of an economic paradigm is Keynesianism. So please don't switch off. I'm not going to get all technical on you, but basically Keynesians have all sorts of theories. They have theories on what causes unemployment. They have theories on what causes inflation, what creates economic growth. They also have theories about what you can do to reduce inflation or boost economic growth. So when you piece all of these theories together, what you get is the Keynesian paradigm. So another example of a paradigm that I think all of us are familiar with, you could call it the big government paradigm, which is basically a set of theories and ideas that supports the status quo of the economic and political model that we've got. So one idea, one component of this big government paradigm is that we need central planning by governments and bureaucrats, because if we didn't, there would be chaos. Another element of this paradigm would be equality by outcome. So what's moral is for the government to treat people unequally in order to make them more equal by outcome. This is something that's been indoctrinated into people's thinking, and it's part of this big government paradigm. Another element of this paradigm would be the belief in democracy. So if 51% of people vote for a particular party, this is the best case scenario, then that 51% can do whatever it wants. It can inflict tyranny on the other 49% of the population, and it's all okay. Obviously, to short circuit the comments, I'm going to get people saying, well, only like less than 2 in 10 people actually voted for Starmer, and that's true. You know, that's because we've got a first past the post electoral system. But you know, basically what we've got in Britain is what, rather than the tyranny of the majority, we've actually got a tyranny of the minority. But most people still think that democracy is the best form of government. You know, this is part of the big government paradigm, as I've been saying. Most people think that it's perfectly acceptable. Paradigms can develop over time. New theories can be bolted onto an existing paradigm. So an example of that is in recent years, well, I suppose since Blair really, is the idea of hate speech. That you know, words can be as hurtful as a punch in the face, which is clearly preposterous, and it kind of runs right against John Stuart Mill's harm principle. But anyway, that's something, it's part of the existing paradigm, isn't it? That most people didn't really kick off against hate speech laws because it never affected them. It gradually became part of the existing paradigm. So what about this phrase then? The title of this video, critics of the existing paradigm. Where did that come from? Well, the simple answer is that something that I once said when I was a teacher at school. And we had one of these in-service training days. You know, these teachers at the last school I worked at, a couple of days before the kids arrived, the teachers would be hauled back into school, and we'd have these meetings. And some of the meetings were like about in-service training, philosophical issues. So I don't know, we might have something about dyslexia or something. Or, you know, this one session I remember was about critical thinking. This is quite funny, really, because it's a classic example of an inversion. So when schools go on about how they want students to become critical thinkers, what they actually want and need from students is the exact opposite. They want students who are inclined towards hugging the consensus rather than doing any thinking whatsoever independently, let alone critical thinking. Excuse me, I've just been eating an odd blueberry that's not been picked. Yeah, so in this in-service training session, you do what all teachers do in these things, is that we were asked to define what we thought critical thinking was. And that was the phrase that I came up with. A critical thinker is somebody who's a critic of the existing paradigm. And true critical thinkers are about as rare as rocking horse poop, in that there's very, very strong social pressure on people not to rock the boat and to agree with what everybody else says. You know, you've got these Ash conformity studies, haven't you? You remember those ones about the lengths of the lines and stuff? And most people went along with a patently incorrect answer if the kind of plants in the survey all said that the incorrect answer was the correct answer. People would actually just go against the evidence of their own eyes and their own logic, and also go with the wrong answer if everybody else had selected the wrong answer. So schools, and I increasingly so, I think society in general is very, very, very big on basically getting people to not think critically. Critical thinkers are, they rock the boat too much, and they can be dangerous as far as the establishment is concerned, because they can throw up ideas and maybe instigate whole movements that move society in a direction that the big club doesn't want society moved in. So I guess one conclusion that I'm coming to here is that don't believe schools when they say, we want your kid, you know, we value critical thinking. They don't at all. Schools, if your kid is inclined towards critical thinking, it's highly likely that A, they won't do very well at school, because their ability to think critically will mean that they're more likely to write answers that aren't featured on valid answers, but answers that are not part of the existing paradigm, and therefore not on an examiner's mark scheme. You know, the examiners getting to where they are because they're consensus huggers rather than critical thinkers. And then the other thing that you can expect, unfortunately, if your kid is inclined towards critical thinking, is that they'll be unpopular at school. Not necessarily with kids, their peers, but with teachers, because they'll probably be asking awkward questions, many of which the Dumbo consensus hugging average teacher is incapable of answering, or they really, really hate having to, here's another phrase that they use, think out of the box. You know, for me, I always used to think like, what box? But they hate doing it, and they're really resentful towards students that ask them to do some independent thinking. So why does all of this matter? I think, you know, we're moving to a situation now where the whole of society is heavily weighed up towards supporting the consensus hugger, and it's severely penalising people who are inclined towards being critics of the existing paradigm. These people are actually being persecuted. People like Sir Keir Starmer are locking people up for anti-establishment ideas, people who think differently, who've got ideas that lie outside the existing paradigm of the big government model. I think the other thing to think about too is, what does society lose when we persecute critical thinkers? The simple answer to that is that we lose a lot of ideas, because what critical thinkers do is, these people who are critics of the existing paradigm, is that they're likely to act as a catalyst. They come up with new ideas, new ways of doing things, things that people have never thought of doing before. And these people were, I suppose in the past, Britain used to be the home of kind of people who had eccentric ideas, different ways of doing things. If you think back to the Industrial Revolution, Britain was the first country in the world to industrialize. We were the home of people who thought differently, who weren't afraid to try new things. And as a result of that process of experimentation, things developed in Britain. As I say, like places like Manchester was the world's first industrial city, with all sorts of developments that transform lives, such as running water, sanitation, housing, modern transport systems like railways, etc. And the socialists are going to hate this, but these developments didn't come about as a result of central planning by the government. These people were entrepreneurs, people like George Stephenson, Arkwright, invented, I'm not sure if it was it's a spinning jenny, wasn't it? So these people were like independent, critical thinkers. These are people that were prepared to gamble, take, experiment with things, tinker with things, not afraid to try new things. And as a result of that, society benefited massively from innovation. So what I'm talking about here's the kind of like the build up to the main point I wanted to make in the video, is that what Keir Starmer is about is he wants to extinguish independent critical thought. It was the same also, because he's a collectivist, that's what collectivists do. It was the same in, communist Russia or in fascist Nazi Germany. What people are expected to do there is hug the consensus, go along with the status quo, whatever it is, not ask questions, and do exactly what they're told to do, sacrifice their own individuality for the collectivist good as defined by the central planners. And this is what Keir Starmer is about, exactly the same. He's exactly the same. So what happens is that basically you're going to get a whole nation of people who are just obedient rule followers, who are afraid of coming up with new ideas and new ways of doing things. So what you get is just a stagnant society. And that's what well, to be honest with you, it will get worse in Britain, because the kind of persecution of independent critical thinkers is intensifying in Britain. But we've already seen the fruits of this, because it's been going on for quite a long time. I would say since the 1950s, 1960s. There's been a move towards collectivism, where individuals are expected to not pursue what they want to do, but to sacrifice their lives for the greater collective good, as defined by a handful of technocrats. So what I say is just expect more stagnation. Nothing is going to improve at all. We're just going to, at best, stay where we are. And in fact, actually disintegrate, because there needs to be investment just to replace worn out capital, worn out machinery. And that's just not going to take place in the current environment, where any sort of initiative is stymied. The critical thinker is persecuted. And, this is obviously what happened in communist Russia. This is what happened in Nazi Germany. They made huge mistakes because people, another analogy would be the emperor's new clothes. In the type of society Keir Starmer is creating, people are afraid to call out the fact that the emperor's got no clothes. So society just stagnates at best. So that's all I want to say today. So God bless.